In the long history of life on Earth, there is one event that stands above all others in its sheer destructive power: the Great Dying. 252 million years ago, a mysterious killer erased over 90% of species from the planet. For decades, the identity of this killer remained the coldest of cases. But geology holds its own kind of evidence, and deep within the rock of modern-day Siberia, investigators have found their prime suspect: a vast field of ancient volcanic rock known as the Siberian Traps. Could a volcano, no matter how large, truly be the weapon behind a near-total extinction? Now let's open the fossil record and resurrect the story of this Jurassic Titan. To understand the crime, we must first understand the world in which it took place. The late Permian period was not a world of dinosaurs. It was an ancient kingdom ruled by our own distant relatives, the synapsids, and a host of other strange and wonderful creatures. Great tusked dicynodonts roamed in herds, while formidable saber-toothed gorgonopsians staked their claim as apex predators. The oceans were equally vibrant, filled with trilobites, sea scorpions, and colossal reefs built by sponges and bryozoans. This was a world humming with life, a complex and stable system that had thrived for tens of millions of years. It was into this world that our suspect emerged. When we analyze the Siberian Traps, we are not talking about a single volcano like Vesuvius or Mount St. Helens. We are describing a continental flood basalt event, a geological phenomenon of almost unimaginable scale. For a period lasting hundreds of thousands of years, fissures in the Earth's crust miles long split open, unleashing seas of molten rock. The lavas flowed across an area of 7 million square kilometers, an area larger than the continental United States, burying the landscape under a blanket of basalt up to 4 kilometers thick in some places. The sheer volume of magma involved is estimated to be over 3 million cubic kilometers, enough to cover the entire globe in a layer several meters deep. This is the first key piece of evidence in our investigation. Opportunity. Using radiometric dating techniques on the volcanic rock, geologists have been able to construct a precise timeline for the eruption. What they found was a shocking correlation. The main pulse of the Siberian Traps' eruptive activity, the period of its most violent and voluminous output, aligns perfectly with the thin layer of rock that marks the mass extinction boundary. The suspect was undeniably at the scene of the crime, at the precise moment the crime was committed. This is no coincidence. It is the cornerstone of the case against the Traps. The eruption was not merely a backdrop to the extinction, it was the trigger. But the lava itself, while locally devastating, couldn't have killed life on the other side of the planet. To understand how this event became a global killer, we must look beyond the rock and into the air. The true murder weapon wasn't the fire from below, but the poison it released into the sky. Having placed our suspect at the scene of the crime, the investigation shifts to the murder weapon itself. The lava flows of the Siberian Traps were merely the delivery system. The true kill mechanisms were chemical, delivered on a global scale through the atmosphere and oceans. When we conduct a forensic analysis of the event, we find not one, but a cascade of interconnected assaults that dismantled the planet's life support systems. The primary agents were the colossal quantities of gas released during the eruptions. The first and most significant of these was carbon dioxide. The magma didn't just well up through inert crust, it intruded into and incinerated the vast Siberian coal basin, one of the largest deposits of organic carbon on the planet. This effectively cooked trillions of tons of coal, releasing its stored carbon directly into the atmosphere. The result was a catastrophic greenhouse effect. When we visualize the data from oxygen isotopes in marine fossils, we see a sharp spike in oceanic temperatures, a clear heat signature of this massive CO2 injection. Global temperatures may have soared by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. This initial warming was the first wave of the assault, putting ecosystems everywhere under extreme stress and pushing many species towards their thermal limits. But CO2 wasn't the only culprit. The eruptions also released immense clouds of sulfur dioxide. Once in the atmosphere, these aerosols would have combined with water vapor to create sulfuric acid, which then fell as intensely corrosive acid rain. This would have had a devastating impact on terrestrial ecosystems. We see evidence of this in the fossil record, with a spore spike from fungi and other hardy plants that thrive in devastated landscapes, indicating the widespread collapse of forests. This acid rain would have also leached nutrients from the soil, poisoning rivers and altering the chemistry of the oceans as it washed off the continents. This alteration of ocean chemistry was the next phase of the attack. As trillions of tons of atmospheric CO2 dissolved into the seawater, it formed carbonic acid, triggering rapid ocean acidification. For the countless marine organisms that build shells and skeletons, from calcium carbonate, from the reef-building organisms to plankton at the base of the food chain, this was a death sentence. Their shells would have literally started to dissolve in the corrosive water. The fossil record corroborates this, showing the complete disappearance of major reef systems and a catastrophic decline in shelled organisms precisely at the extinction boundary. Simultaneously, the superheated climate was creating another lethal condition in the seas. Anoxia, or the loss of dissolved oxygen. Warmer water simply cannot hold as much oxygen as cold water. As the oceans heated up, they began to suffocate. Furthermore, the acid rain washing nutrient-rich soil from the scorched continents into the sea would have triggered massive algal blooms. When these blooms died and sank, their decomposition consumed what little oxygen remained, creating vast, stagnant dead zones. We find direct evidence for this in the geological record. Rock layers from the end Permian are often black shales, rich in organic matter that could not decay due to the lack of oxygen, and containing chemical biomarkers for green sulfur bacteria, microbes that thrive in anoxic, light-filled waters. The evidence is clear. The Siberian Traps unleashed a multi-pronged chemical assault. It wasn't just heat or acid rain or ocean suffocation. It was all of them working in concert. The eruptions created a runaway process where each environmental catastrophe amplified the others, creating a lethal feedback loop that sent the entire planetary system into a death spiral. The suspect's fingerprints are on every one of these murder weapons. The case against the Siberian Traps is now overwhelming. We have established motive, means, and opportunity. The final act of this investigation is to deliver the verdict by assembling the evidence into a coherent narrative, showing how this single geological event triggered a fatal cascade that brought the world to its knees. The key to understanding the Great Dying is to see it not as a singular catastrophe, but as a domino effect of collapsing systems, all knocked over by the initial, staggering force of the eruptions. The verdict is this: the Siberian Traps were the architect of the Permian extinction. They initiated a runaway feedback loop from which the planet's biosphere could not escape. It began with the direct atmospheric poisoning from carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, triggering the initial shocks of global warming and acid rain. This was the first domino. It stressed and weakened ecosystems across the globe, making them vulnerable to the next wave of the assault. The second domino fell in the oceans. As the climate warmed and acid washed from the continents, the seas began to acidify and lose their oxygen. This triggered the third and fourth dominoes almost simultaneously: the collapse of marine ecosystems due to acidification and the spread of anoxic dead zones that suffocated all but the hardiest life forms. This is where the feedback loop truly took hold. A warmer, stagnant ocean is the perfect breeding ground for methane-producing microbes, which would have pumped even more potent greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, further accelerating the warming in a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. The final, horrifying blow may have been the eruption of hydrogen sulfide from the anoxic depths of the ocean. This toxic gas would have poisoned terrestrial life and, critically, shredded the ozone layer, exposing the surface to lethal UV radiation. This explains the totality of the extinction, accounting for the near-complete collapse of life on land as well as in the sea. Every piece of evidence, the carbon isotope spike, the signs of ocean anoxia, the fossil record of forest collapse, points back to the same origin. The Siberian Traps were not just a series of eruptions, they were the engine of a planetary killing machine that attacked life from every conceivable angle. It was the most profound biological crisis in 500 million years. A perfect storm of geological and biological catastrophes, all ignited by one colossal volcanic event. The Great Dying irrevocably altered the course of evolution. It wiped the slate clean, ending the long reign of the synapsids and creating a power vacuum that, after millions of years of recovery, would be filled by a new dynasty of creatures, the dinosaurs. In the immense tapestry of Earth's history, the Siberian Traps represent a chilling reminder of the intricate connections that sustain life. The rock layers that mark this event are not just a record of death, but a stark warning of how a planet's own internal forces can push its delicate biosphere past a point of no return, creating a silent world from which life itself barely escaped.